I have quite an update for you from our operations in Gaza as well as from the West Bank. That comes from our colleagues in the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. From Gaza, they warn that ongoing hostilities across the Gaza Strip continue to kill, injure, and displace Palestinians on a devastating scale. The conflict also continues to pose unacceptable risks to aid operations, despite our repeated calls for safe, unimpeded access to reach people in need. Yesterday, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that 14 out of the 20 humanitarian trucks collected from the newly opened Kesufim crossing were shot at and looted, injuring 3 of our drivers. The remaining 6 trucks reached a warehouse in Deir al-Balah. For months, we've been calling for the opening of more land routes, both inside, into and within Gaza, but we also need increased access and security assurances, as well as more supplies, so that aid can quickly reach all people in need across Gaza at the scale necessary. It is also vital that essential commercial goods can enter the Gaza Strip. As we've said repeatedly, it's also critical that Israeli authorities facilitate the movement of aid workers and supplies across the Gaza Strip. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that another 3 missions planned by OCHA and the World Food Program to reach besieged parts of North Gaza Governorate today were rejected. In Gaza City in recent days, we, along with our humanitarian partners, visited 9 sites hosting internally displaced people so as to carry out assessment as to what these people need. Shelter is obviously one of the most pressing priorities, as well as food, hygiene kits, and other essential items. Members of the assessment mission also met with partners working in Gaza City to scale up humanitarian assistance for the roughly 120,000 people who have been displaced by the Israeli siege from North Gaza Governorate to Gaza City. Despite access restrictions and other challenges, the humanitarian community in Gaza remains determined to reach Palestinians across the Strip with support. In the south, the Gaza desalination plant's power lines have finally been repaired after intense efforts, including advocacy efforts. This will significantly boost the production of desalinated water in southern Gaza. OCHA says that 20,000 liters of chlorine for the treatment of drinking water have also arrived in the south, enough to ensure safe supplies for up to 1 month. However, distribution remains a major challenge due to damaged pipelines, fuel shortages, the lack of water, and the lack of storage containers. It's critical that adequate fuel and other essential supplies can enter the Gaza Strip on a reliable basis to support the Strip's beleaguered water infrastructure. And turning to the West Bank, we have new updates on the worsening situation there from our humanitarian colleagues. They warn that Israeli forces continue to use lethal warlike tactics that seem to go well beyond standard for law enforcement measures. OCHA tells us that between Tuesday of last week and this Monday, 3 of the 11 Palestinians killed by Israeli forces were hit by airstrikes. Demolitions also continue across the West Bank, displacing people, affecting their livelihoods and access to critical services. This has been especially pronounced in East Jerusalem. Between the 5th and the 11th November, 50 out of 62 Palestinians displaced due to demolitions, citing lack of permits, were from East Jerusalem. Nearly half of those people were children. Our humanitarian colleagues note that just yesterday, Israeli authorities demolished a residential building in the Al-Bustan area of Silwan, which housed a community center. This facility with a lifeline for more than 1,000 people, offering workshops, scouting, sports and cultural activities for women and youth groups. It's suffice to say the loss of the center is a serious blow to that community. Moving to Lebanon, concluding his 3-day visit to the area, Undersecretary General for Peace Operations Jean-Pierre Lacroix will head to Israel tomorrow to meet with officials there. In Lebanon, he met with senior Lebanese officials, with members of the diplomatic corps and representatives of troop contributing countries to our UNIFIL peacekeeping mission. In all his meetings, Mr. Lacroix reiterated calls for a cessation of hostilities and underscored that the UN supports diplomatic efforts towards the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701. We remain, of course, gravely concerned by the continued exchange of fire between the IDF and Hezbollah. From midnight to noon, from midnight until noon today, from midnight to noon today, local time in Lebanon, 13 airstrikes were recorded by UNIFIL through its area of operations. UNIFIL reports that IDF operations in southern Lebanon and clashes with Hezbollah are continuing. Our peacekeepers report intense clashes, airstrikes, and indirect fire in the area of Shama in Sector West. Israeli IDF activity also continues in the east of UNIFIL's area of operations with clashes near Hula. We remind all parties of their obligations to ensure safety and security of UN personnel and property, and to respect the inviolability of United Nations premises at all times. We're also aware of media reports and claims by the parties about strikes outside of our missions area of operations, both in Lebanon and in Israel. The increasing impact on civilians remains grave concern, and we condemn all loss of civilian life. Parties to the conflict must adhere to international law and protect civilians and civilian infrastructure. We continue to support efforts towards a ceasefire and a diplomatic solution. Staying in Lebanon, our humanitarian colleagues there tell us that yesterday a humanitarian aid convoy of 14 trucks delivered emergency assistance, including food, health, water, hygiene, and sanitation supplies, to the area of Ras Baalbek in the Baalbek Hermel Governorate. This is the first convoy since September 23rd of this year. Meanwhile, airstrikes continue across the country, particularly in densely populated areas of Beirut's southern suburbs, causing heavy damage and displacement. Again, we reiterate the use of heavy weapons in densely populated areas must be avoided. UNICEF reports that Lebanon's children are now enduring the deadliest phase of the war. More than 80% of all children killed in Lebanon over the past year have been killed in the last 50 days. Yesterday, in one day alone, 13 children were killed in 3 separate Israeli airstrikes on Mount Lebanon Governorate. That's what Lebanese authorities are telling us. Our humanitarian colleagues say the number of injured people is also on the rise. Authorities in Lebanon report that more than 14,000 people have been injured since October of last year, putting undoubtedly additional pressure on an already highly strained healthcare system in that country.